Hi Spring fans, welcome to another installment of Spring Tips. In this installment we're going to talk about two topics that are near and dear to my heart, namely distributed tracing and metrics. Now, you, dear and astute reader, or listener, or watcher, or whatever, may remember that I did actually look at distributed tracing in terms of Zipkin, which is now Open Zipkin, way back in the on the 8th of February 2017, so more than 3 years ago. And I also looked at metrics collection on the 2nd of May 2018, so almost 2 years ago, right? So long time for both of these topics, but the basics are still the same. The idea is that we have Spring Cloud Sleuth. Spring Cloud Sleuth is an abstraction that supports distributed tracing. Distributed tracing helps you capture information about how requests flow through the system, how a request starts at node 1 and moves to node 2 and then to node 3 and so on. And Spring Cloud Sleuth can talk to any number of different distributed tracing services, not least of which is OpenZipkin. Okay, OpenZipkin, of course, was birthed at Twitter and has now become sort of de facto standard for a lot of people. Then there's a Micrometer. Micrometer is the abstraction that the Spring team built. It does not require Spring to do its work. It's the other way around, in fact. Spring Boot integrates Micrometer into Spring Boot 2.0, and uses it as the backend for our metrics collection in the actuator. You can use it independent of Spring, although I don't know why you wouldn't, and it in turn can be configured to talk to any of a number of different monitoring systems, including but not limited to AppOptics, Azure Monitor, Netflix, Atlas, CloudWatch, Datadog, Dynatrace, Elastic, Ganglia, Graphite, Humio, Influx, and Telegraph, JMX, Kairos DB, New Relic, Prometheus, Signal FX, Google Cloud Stack Driver, StatsD, and Wavefront. And so metrics are all about keys and values, statistics, information about the amount of things or the frequency of things that your application is doing. So whereas a trace can help you drill down into the particular path a particular message took, statistics give you a sense of how many requests you've had at a given endpoint, how many HTTP gets, how many 404s were returned, that kind of stuff. It's good for counting and doing statistical analysis of the application. Two different sides, if you will, to the same application coin. So I like these topics, and they're well supported by these abstractions, Spring Cloud Sleuth and Micrometer. Today, my friends, we're going to talk about what I consider to be the most turnkey experience you're going to get that enables both of them, and that is Wavefront. Now, Wavefront is a technology that's part of the Tanzu portfolio. It's another project along with Spring and Kubernetes, our Kubernetes distribution called PKS, that works well together. That we on the Tanzu team hope you'll consider as part of a holistic thing, right? So obviously Spring is a very popular open source project, and you can use it with any number of different backing services, and Micrometer is the thing that allows you to do that. But I was really impressed with Wavefront, and so I figured what better way to, first of all, revisit this topic, these two different topics, some of which are, as I say, 3 years old, and second of all, what better way to make the work of building a Spring Tips installment super easy. I love it when I can have a short Spring Tips installment, because that means you can get something useful, and I can be done with the the presentation without having to do so much work, right? This one's really easy. I like this. I'm glad that we've already got those two videos out there. I refer you, please, to those installments, and with that, we can go ahead and just build an application. So what we're going to do, as always, is we're going to go to start.spring.io. We're going to use Spring Boot 2.3.0 snapshot. So again, when this comes out, this will be the current state of the art, but I encourage you to use the latest 2.3.0 or later. Don't use the milestone 4. So if it's anything later than milestone 4, or if it's 2.3.0 snapshot, or if it's 2.4 or 5, whenever you start watching this, we might be on Spring Boot 3, who knows? But for now, it has to be the latest and greatest. So I'm going to use Java 11. I'm going to call this application Wavefront, and I'm going to bring in the Sleuth abstraction. I'm going to bring in the reactive web support. I'll bring in R2DBC, Lombok, and what else do we need? I guess we Don't need anything else there. Sleuth, Reactive Web, R2DBC, and Lombok. Now, at the moment, there are no Wavefront dependencies here on the Spring Initializer. I'd love to see that change. Time will tell. Now, here's our application. UAO, wavefront.zip. And we can just build an application as usual. This is just a regular Spring Boot application, so we don't need to do anything special. And in fact, that's sort of what I'm going to do. I'm just going to build a traditional, reactive Spring Boot application, the very same sample application you've seen me write, no doubt, a million times, right? So this is nothing special at all. Wavefront application. Okay. And it's going to be a reactive application. So our reactive application is going to talk to a data store. In this case, we're going to be using Postgres. Did I forget that? Let's make sure I didn't. Looks like I did. That's okay. Go back here. Postgres, control space, Postgres. Add that in. And Maven. Re-import. Okay. So this is my Wavefront application, and we're going to write an application that just writes reservations to the database, as we always do. So private string ID, private string name at ID, data at all_args constructor, at no_args constructor. I'm going to have a thing that persists data to the database, extends the reactive CRUD repository. Okay. I'm just going to create a bean to write some of that data to the database. So, runner. Okay, I'm going to inject the reservation repository here. All right. So flux.just A, B, C, D. Map each name into a new reservation, passing a null for the ID. Take each one, and we're going to use the collaborating object here, rr.save, passing an R. Now that's the pipeline, right? But actually what I want to do is I want to delete everything as usual, so I have a clean slate, so to speak. So I'll say rr.delete all, then many, data, then many, rr.find all, and finally subscribe. System out print line. All right. There's the repository. Goody. Okay, so there's the entire thing right there. There's the whole application. We want to have an HTTP endpoint, I suppose. So let's do that as well. So router function. I'm going to use the functional reactive style. I've done a Spring Tips video on this one as well. I've done a Spring Tips video on R2DBC. This is kind of a Spring Tips video about Spring Tips videos, if you will. So route. Good. New handler function. .ok.body, and what I want to return here is just it's all the data from the database. So I'm going to inject the reservation repository. Find all reservation .class. Make this a lambda. Okay, good stuff. Alrighty. And hello. And hello body value. do. Okay. Yikes. All right, good. So there's our whole application. Let's just go ahead and start that, make sure that works to our satisfaction, and then we'll instrument it. We'll add Wavefront into the mix to make sure everything's working. I have neglected to specify an R2DBC connection, so let's do that. R2DBC Postgres localhost orders. Okay. Username, password. Alrighty. Take this again. Okay, that worked. Now, let's make sure we have a few things correct. I want to use Hoxton SR3. This is a specific nuance of this particular point in time, but again, I suspect that it'll get better for you in short order. Alrighty, there we go. So that's up and running. And then we want to actually bring in Wavefront. So I'm going to require both the dependency and the repository. But again, I expect that within short order that dependency will be available in Maven Central or at the very least one of the Spring repositories. But for now, I've got to do a little tap dancing. The other way to get around this, of course, is just to go get the Wavefront Spring Boot starter from GitHub. It's a open source project. You can find it out there, and then just build it, right? But for now, of course, I'm happy to do this as well. So, pasting, and this is my repository that goes down here. That's the Sonatype snapshot repository. Okay, and here is my Wavefront Spring Boot starter, which in turn has auto configuration. And by the way, that auto configuration, this whole integration into Spring, was developed in tandem with the Spring Boot team. So it's no surprise that it just works. It's just really, really well done. Okay, so here we go. We've got this. Now, in order for us to have a working Wavefront application, I also need to specify some properties. So let's go back to my build here and make sure IntelliJ realizes what just happened. Okay. Wavefront. So now we have two properties that we need to care about here. First of all, we don't need to tell it the cluster or anything like that. So it can talk to a hosted version, right? That's what we're going to do. Is we're going to use a hosted version, wavefront.com, or wavefront.surf. But you can also run this thing on premise, right? So it's a useful option for both. I'm all about not running things if I don't have to. I'd much rather pay somebody else to do it, so it's not my problem. So all we're going to do is give this thing a application name. And when you think of application, think of like the logical application, right? You've got what is the logical name for the result of all your microservices, right? So for example, Netflix, you could say the application's name is Netflix, but each service, is different, right? Each service that makes up Netflix has its own name as well. So the application name could be Netflix. In this case, I'll just call it Spring Tips, okay? And then the service name is the individual service, so reservation, all right? There we go. So there could be 5 different services under Spring Tips, for example, as a technicality there. Okay, a lot of other stuff you could specify. I'm happy with that. Now, this is automatically going to work, and this is actually, I think, the coolest part is I haven't actually told it how it should work. I don't have any environment variables. I don't have anything on my local machine, and yet this will work. Actually, that's not true. I do have something on my local machine, and I'll show you what that is in just a second. Okay, so my existing Wavefront account information has been restored from disk. And what it's saying is it's got that Wavefront token. It's a ~/Wavefront token. And that token is exactly what you see here. It's this thing that was generated for me in the previous run. So if I go ahead and move Wavefront token to the desktop, okay, so it's now gone. I'll restart. Oops. So that is gone, and it couldn't auto-negotiate a new token. So the service might just be down. Let me go ahead and retry it. Normally, it's up, and it just auto-negotiates a new token for you. There you go. So that happened. This is what you should have seen the very large majority of times. What it does is it tells you what properties you should use to be able to use the application, to be able to connect this application and its metrics to the version in the cloud, okay? And it's even gone so far as to create a new Wavefront token file for you, okay? So there's my token. Obviously, this will be gone long before you get to worry about it. But so 10A7 matches up with this one here, right? So Wavefront token, move desktop, move Wavefront token to tilde, okay? So now, remember this ends 10A7. Go ahead and restart it. There you go. So it's now connecting to this one. So the first time without the token there, it'll give you the token and it'll give you a URL that you can click down here. This URL is something that works just one time. So take it. I like to open up an incognito browser, just paste it in there, and it dumps me into a dashboard for my Spring Tips application and my reservation service. Now you can see that I've already exercised this endpoint before, but let's go ahead and exercise it some more. This application. So I'm just wailing on my keyboard here, just making requests. Ditto for hello. Okay, so hopefully you can see the pulsing tab icon there in the video. And we're just going to give it time, okay? And it takes about a minute or so for each incoming request to come. You can see that so far I've got, a fairly good distribution of requests across different endpoints. So get reservations, get hello, and then here's reservations for everything as opposed to just HTTP get. So actually, I'm sorry, this is get from an old application, actually a lot older, without the current library, without the current sleuth support. So that's different. You won't have that problem. Yours will be consistent. So 42 and 28. Okay, so what do we get if we refresh? Okay, so there's all the requests, but you can see that that's the top requests. We've actually got more than that. So if I look at the most recent, right, 255, 255, 255, 255, 255, all these requests that I just made, and then before that last set of requests were at 152. So these are all the requests I just made right now, and you can see that next to the requests it's showing me the percentiles, right? And in which percentile my application request landed. So for example, anything in the green side or sort of left of the orange is good. If I'm in the red, that means it's in a high percentile. It's not good, right? It means that the experience for those for that particular user, for that particular request was not as good as it could have been. Okay, so we're good, looking good, right? We can actually see here this request took a long time, right? 20 milliseconds. Most of these take 8 milliseconds, 5 milliseconds, 6 milliseconds, 4 milliseconds, etc. So lots of detail there. I like that if I click on any one particular thing, I can see the query, I can see different timings and so on. I can look at the window of time there. I can look at the critical path breakdown. Click on that. Let me see here. Go down here, and I get details about the application itself. So get reservations. It says the tag. And by the way, tags are logical attributes that get propagated along the request of the application. So the request, to HTTP path happened. The operation name was HTTP get /reservations. The source was from this microservice running on Joshua's MacBook Pro 2019 local. So all sorts of stuff there, right? I mean, I can drill down into the different endpoints as well. If I want to, I can look at all the requests, some of the requests, etc. In this case, I've just got them by most recent. You can do it also by all sorts of other things. Which one took the longest? Looks like I had a request here that was insanely long, right? That's entirely possible. 56 milliseconds. Not good, right? Don't want that one to be so slow. If I go back to my dashboard over here, you can see all the usual things, right? So you can see, well, first of all, you can see that the top request has now since updated. And then second of all, you can see things like the request latency. You can see the heap size and the garbage collection information, the number of threads and so on. The requests, the slowest requests by P9, the P95 percentile, and the top requests. These are the most common ones, basically. So you got lots of information here. The request rate, all that kind of information. And this is kind of the overview screen. I already showed you the traces screen where you can look at all the details about any particular request and the critical path and so on. What I think is most interesting is that you can actually put all that in your own custom dashboard. So if I go to service dashboard here, right? This is where we were just a second ago. This is just an overview. You can combine and customize and do all sorts of stuff with this. So if I look at all dashboards, there's a bunch of them that come out of the box with Wavefront that you can explore. It's part of your tutorial, your introductory tutorial. So you can see that these dashboards can be very detailed. Lots of different lots of different statistics and things like that can be shown to you on these dashboards. If you want, you can actually then configure an integration, and these integrations are where you have a lot of the power that I think will be very compelling. So obviously, anything that runs Spring Boot, and that is to say Cloud Foundry, Kubernetes, all the different cloud platforms, all of them will appreciate what I just showed you. So that's already done. But even if you're not using Spring Boot, there are ways to get Wavefront integrated into your environment for all of these. And there are technology-specific integrations here as well. All that is very cool as well. But when I really, look at all the different the cloud infrastructure, these things can be used. This thing can be used to capture metrics for all these different types of runtimes, languages, technologies, platforms, cloud infrastructure, Google Cloud, Microsoft, AWS, etc. Different data stores, DevOps tools, messaging integrations, monitoring tools, all these different things, right? Operating systems. My goodness, all these things can be used. What's most interesting for me is once you've triggered a threshold, or once you've gotten a particular bug or whatever, or you've got a rate that you're interested in, or something exceeds a threshold, you can then configure it to alert you, right? You can actually have it send an email, you can have it use a webhook, or do a Slack message, or whatever, right? So this is really where I think people really, it starts to connect what's happening in the application to the, to the buzzing in our pockets based on activity, right? So this is really, really powerful. It's just sort of built in out of the box. I really like Wavefront. Obviously, I've only begun to scratch the surface here, and that's just sort of the point. I don't want to spend too long on all this, because what you really need to know is that it just works, right? This is a fully featured tool for observability. I recommend you try it out. Obviously, when you run this application, you're going to want to have metrics underscore. You're going to have management metrics export Wavefront. You want to have that whole thing as an environment variable, right? And you don't want to have that hard coded in your code. But then all your applications will automatically connect to this thing, and it'll just work. So very, very, compelling experience, I think. Or you could, by the way, this is, if you saw our Spring Tips video on configuration, then you could also put that in the config server. So really, really easy getting started experience. It was actually easier to get this working than it was to get Zipkin working. And if you saw that video, you know it was not hard to get Zipkin working. Ditto for using Micrometer, right? It's using Micrometer behind the scenes. It's using Spring Cloud Sleuth behind the scenes here. All that is just done for you. You don't have to worry about it. There is, as far as I understand it, support for open tracing, but I don't know why you would use that. This is a reactive web application. It works for non-reactive applications as well, because of course Spring Cloud Sleuth does. So anywhere that Spring Cloud Sleuth works, this also works. Lots of different opportunities here, my friends. I hope you'll give it a shot. Give Wavefront a go. Go ahead and try it. Just get this code. You can find this code in the github.com spring-tips repository, and there you will find this particular project under, the project name is Wavefront, and there you can run the code and see it work. And of course, by the time you watch this, who knows, there may very well be a GA product or a more stable milestone. So we'd love to have your feedback. I'm super impressed. It is the easiest integration I've ever seen for such a complicated thing, a complicated result, right? Distributed traces and metrics. I'm already impressed, but I know it'll get better. And we'd love to have your feedback. We'd love to hear what you want to make this application the best experience for you. I want to thank you so much for listening, everybody. And as always, we'll see you next time.